there are technical utopians out there who want to bring back the dead. And then we have the testimony from Hendrik that new laboratory techniques have been developed that can create new life with bits of genetic material. And that's why I invited Dr. Michael Zook to come here. He's a dentist, he's a collector of dinosaur bones, and while I may have a television set, he has a tooth, John Lennon's tooth. Dr. Michael Zook.
Thank you very much. I'm just a dentist, so excuse I can't speak in these fancy languages that everyone else does, but here's my story.
Ridiculous, and tonight we're adding the $31,000 tooth that came straight from John Lennon's mouth. Probably. I say probably only because the tooth is apparently too fragile to confirm it through DNA testing, but Lennon reportedly gave it to his housekeeper in the 1960s. Or more on that in a moment. On Friday, we told you the tooth was going up for auction and that it was expected to fetch is a fancy auction talk term for how much someone is willing to pay for a rotten old molar, about $16,000. Well, lo and behold, the auction happened over the weekend, and truth be told, it went for almost double that, $31,200. Should I have said tooth be told or tooth be sold? I couldn't really decide. Anyway, here's more of the backstory in this cavity-ridden piece of music history. As I said, Lennon reportedly gave it to his housekeeper after a dentist had to, twist and shout it out one day back in the 60s. The housekeeper's son says Lennon told her she could throw it away or give it to her daughter, who was a huge Beatles fan, and apparently it's been in the family ever since. I was happy to read that this wasn't the only gift that Lennon gave his housekeeper and her family. There were other things like jewelry and jackets and other stuff that didn't come out of his face. The housekeeper is now 90 years old. Her son says the time was right to sell the tooth rather than take the risk of getting it lost. But you got to hand it to her. 40 years hanging on to someone else's decayed tooth. That is quite a run. Perhaps she should get a commemorative plaque. Thank you. So you're probably wondering who in the world paid more than $31,000 for the tooth.
Me. So, like Moses, who bought Marilyn Monroe's TV for more than I spent on the tooth, I knew this was a big opportunity. And when you see the pictures coming up, I think you'll agree. This is a photograph of the housekeeper, who is rarely seen. She's, again, 90 years old now. And it was to me, a steal. I spent the night before the auction worrying how much should I pay for this tooth. I just had sold a dental practice, so I had some money. I'd been into marketing and writing books before this, and I knew it had a whole pile of potential, and I thought, this could be priceless. So I got the call from the auctioneer, and in an English voice, she said, okay, the auction's live, and quickly the bids surpassed what my reserve was, so I knew I was going to spend more than I wanted to. And I bid live, and I ended up getting it. So it's for me, it was like winning the lottery, but for a lot of people, it was like, what the hell were you thinking? So I ran upstairs, I told my daughter, I said, I got the tooth. She said, what the fuck did you do? She said, I can't even say the things she told me, but anyway, she was very disappointed. Now, the man that spent a few days with John Lennon had to actually thank the housekeeper, and he hooked up with the housekeeper. He didn't know she was alive or dead, but when he heard the tooth was for auction, this man in behind contacted her, did a little Skype interview, and it was kind of neat that he ended up writing a book called John Lennon's Tooth, a story of how he spent a few days with John Lennon thanks to the housekeeper who let him hide in the garage, and finally met up with John Lennon, and John carted him around for a few days to get a little taste of what his life was like. So the publicity exploded across the globe. Bill O'Reilly, of course, thought this was a terrible idea, and he called it an incisor. So for a dentist to have his molar called an incisor, that was extremely insulting. But I was, I knew this was going to be big. So it's not like I didn't know anything about marketing. I had a list of all the different media outlets. I had sent press releases all over the place. I didn't know which stories got picked up thanks to my little press releases or just feeding off the oddity power of this venture. But it just to give you an example, my son was dating a girl from Kazakhstan, and her mother heard it on the radio. Michael Zook bought John Lennon's tooth, and I thought, wow, I'm famous. And she reminded me that my last name Zook actually means beetle in Russian. So I took this weird little event, and I wanted to make the most out of it. So I spent $30,000 or more when you consider there's duty on rotten teeth when you cross the border into Canada. So if anyone has to get their teeth checked at the border, it could be $17,000 or $1,700, sorry, on GST and all that kind of thing. So I sent little notes to the show Oddities. I said, I've got John Lennon's tooth, and I said, well, I like your show. And they liked the idea, so they said, well, come on down, we'll put you on an episode. So went down to New York City, and I brought my celebrity teeth and did a little show. So that was fun. The dead celebrity DNA documentary, they hunted me down. So as Moses mentioned to them, to you, the premise was they wanted to collect the DNA from famous celebrities and see what was common within their DNA. And I initially agreed to participate, but then I started thinking maybe that's giving it away. So they did fly into Red Deer, filmed me, and coaxed me into giving me the tooth for a while. And then I went off on a long trip, and I changed my mind when they already had the tooth and asked for it back. And it made its way back without them doing too much to it. But along the way, they made a story about the idea of talking about cloning. So when I talked to them, I said, yes, that's the ultimate expression of what I could do with this tooth. And as we know now, it's possible someday. So the cloning story was talked about on the show that just broadcast a few months ago, and it talked about how I wanted to own the DNA of John Lennon, which is true. And I think legally I can, even though Yoko Ono would be opposed to that. I think the laws actually let this happen. So the story came out that I wanted to be John Lennon's father. Well, I don't look at it that way. I look at it more like I'm his guardian. If I own his DNA, then I can determine what happens with it. And whether it's done in Canada, sequenced in Canada, if it's moved to another country, it's up to me. So it's a little scary. It's a lot of responsibility. And even though it might not happen for 10, 20 years, there's a lot of things to think about. So, what do you got to do to get noticed around here? You got to do some wild things. My sister, who's an artist, a starving artist, she's been doing art for 25 years or more. And I thought, well, why not put a little piece of the tooth in one of her sculptures? So I said, let's do it. And she did a John Lennon DNA sculpture. So I did a press release for that. Rolling Stones picks it up. So I got my sister into rollingstones.com. And of course, everyone's worried about what are people going to think about this exploitation of a dead celebrity. Well, lots of people think it's creepy and weird, but actually, about half of the people thought it was kind of neat. So I think it's, safe to say it's not as extreme as people would say. Now, one of our pets passed away a week ago, and Duke was a nice dog, and rather than cremate him and have him in a box, we may just use a little of his DNA in a sculpture. So there's there's potential to do unusual things that really can be works of art. And this is, again, the story of how the dead celebrity DNA came out as a documentary in the UK. We don't see it here in Canada or the US, but for my claims to own John Lennon's DNA and to clone him, that was the latest little splurge, and it's just something that I refuse to do interviews on, just to keep the mystique. And again, whenever there's a weird story, some people are going to put surveys on. So again, it was comforting to know that 39% feel it's a great idea to look at human cloning. Not necessarily John Lennon, but again, not totally insane. This man is the man that first cloned a frog, and I think it was probably in the 60s. And another individual wrote a story about him, what his thoughts were about perhaps human cloning and why it wouldn't make any sense at all. It just wouldn't be John Lennon, for example. And my argument would be it would be pretty darn close. It'd be a genetic copy. Could he learn to play guitar and sing the same songs? Of course he could. And if he didn't want to, who's going to force him? But to walk into a stage like this and probably sell it out for years on end at thousands of dollars a ticket, I think most of you here would pay for that. I'll keep trying. There it goes. So again, this story got picked up by Time magazine, where, global news on cloning, it just, I again turned down many interviews with this round just to kind of lay low. And coincidentally, my father, he worked at Time magazine in the 60s. It was would have been neat for him to see that. Now, another topic that relates to use of people's tissues without their permission is the Henrietta Lacks story. So many of you would have read the book by Rebecca Skloot, and a woman in the 50s. Her cells were taken, cultured, and they're still alive today, supposedly weighing millions of pounds. So she in effect is still alive through her cells, and it's helping people throughout the world. So Rebecca felt that it was wrong that her family was not compensated for that. And again, the way the laws are now, it's a gray zone. So is it right or wrong that I would control John Lennon's DNA over Yoko? Some would think it's better that Yoko doesn't control everything. Maybe Julian Lennon should control it. Why did Yoko control the estate? So these were the rock and rollers that I grew up with, and many of you know Kiss are still around and writing books and all that, but they also use body parts to promote themselves. Some may recall that they released a comic book where they put their own blood into the ink. So there are ways to get publicity, and it's nothing new that body parts are used. So yes, we can all dream to be rock stars. Luckily, most of us won't be, but we're very similar. In my case, again, I'm just a dentist, but I'm also a marketer. So I'm a member of a club where I compete in marketing competitions. Dan Kennedy is a name that some people know. And I enter these competitions and show all the weird stuff I do, like coming up with a cartoon character with a swollen face, or marketing high-speed braces, or trademark terms of whatever. And I came in second place a couple times. So the boss said, "It's not good enough. You're just getting local news." I was very impressed with myself. I got into the local paper. But he said, you got to be on 60 Minutes. You got to do more than that. So I felt kind of embarrassed, but I think at this point, I'm doing okay with publicity. Here's a close-up of the tooth. And from the picture, it's obvious that there's a lot of tissue that can be used for research. The tooth will never look like this again because I did do a little work on it. I didn't repair it, clean it up or anything, but I decided to take a little off the edge. So there's my little photo shoot of me and the tooth. So again, it's okay to be weird, and these days you have to be to get attention. Now, what a lot of people don't know is, as a special bonus, I ended up getting Julian Lennon's tooth too. So when we're talking about cross-referencing DNA, there we go. Photo shoots of John Lennon's tooth and Julian. At the tip of that piece of jewelry, I've got a piece around my neck right now, I put in a little dust of John Lennon's tooth so that if I did lose the tooth, I'd always have a little bit there. We took the pendant on a tour of the UK, and dentists were dressing up as the Beatles, offering free mouth cancer exams. So we've done all kinds of things. I wrote a song too.
I don't believe it. Hey John, tell him who we are. We're the Beatles.
Was a big rock singer, played with Paul, George and Ringo, had fun till Yoko made me go.
That sounds just like her.
I sang about peace, I talked against war, 10,000 miles from shore.
It's still
I took
happening.
all kind of drugs, had our faces on mugs. Our biggest thrill was yet to come. It's the thrill that'll get you when you get your tooth picture on the homepage of the Rolling Stones.
So anyway, I can write songs, I can't sing very well, but I've used John Lennon's tooth, Elvis Presley's crown to get publicity. This year, right at this moment, dentists are in the UK dressing up as Elvis Presley with my tooth on loan. I bought a replica of Jaws teeth. That could be next. My book, Confessions of a Former Cosmetic Dentist, came out just before I bought the tooth. And when I did the publicity, I'd always, mention dentist and author of the book. So I got a little free press from that. And from that book, even though the Dental Association didn't like it, I was covered by Marketplace, and I participated in their show. Kind of difficult to do, but we did an undercover investigation and exposed that dentists need to treatment plan a little bit better and maybe not sell porcelain veneers quite as much. The Dental Association again said, you can't sell this book, so okay, I kept them in my garage. But 2020 contacted me and wanted a copy, so I sent them a copy of my book. They wanted to cover the story, but I said, why don't you talk to this patient who was violated by a dentist, and she's in California. So I got the focus off of me onto this patient, and I'm much more happy with that. Next month, I think you might see a story about dentists on 2020. So again, cosmetic dentistry can be used and misused. Celebrities can be used incorrectly to sell dentistry. In short, I've done videos, movies, there's no time to show everything. But I coined the term veneer Nazi, which is a little bit upsetting to some. But I should end and appreciate the time. I definitely have some scientists I have to talk to. Thank you very much.
So, Michael, did you or did you not bring the tooth? That's it? It doesn't even come in a little box?
No. What I did was I took the liberty of cloning it ahead of time.
So what?
And so this is a clone. We clone between a nut and a tooth.
Yeah,
So that's the best I could do for now.
a cachet.
That's right.
So you didn't bring the tooth.
All I've got is a little tooth dust on me.
Why is that?
Well, for the safety of the sequencing,
Right.
the DNA.
So can we get to that? Are you, in fact, going to sequence the DNA?
I
Have
have-
you taken
I
any
have-
steps to do that?
I have people for that.
I get now that your orientation is more to getting some publicity for yourself, but do you intend at any point to actually carry through with the science,
Oh, that's the biggest story here, of course.
right? Will this happen in our lifetime? You've had the tooth for some
I
time,
think so. I mean,
haven't you?
I'm sitting beside a man
No,
that...
but you've had the tooth for some time.
Right.
Have you taken any steps at all to have the DNA sequenced?
What I've done is I had it in the hands of a scientist, but I wanted to get it into a documentary instead of just having a blurb on a UK channel for 30 seconds.
Right.
So I think it deserves more attention, so I'm waiting for that moment to happen.
Okay, so your focus is still media, it's not the science.
Not yet.
I'll probably do my Marilyn Monroe before you do your John Lennon. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Let's do a photo of
Okay.
that.